Pros vs. Joes at-home edition is sponsored by Gigamon. Gigamon Threat Insight accelerates network detection and response by providing continual monitoring and analysis of your network. Utilizing high-fidelity threat detection and recommended next steps, Gigamon Threat Insight offers investigation and response teams a way to operationalize the critical data necessary to defeat active threats in the environment. Visit gigamon.com for more information.
Oh, yeah. Here we go again.
I am here.
Yes, you are.
All right.
What's going on, brother?
Goes well. Actually, I'm representing because there's a mini NetWars going online right now. But
no kidding.
Out. Yep. We have CTFception going on right now.
Dude, seriously, that's crazy, man. Well, like, this was a happy surprise, quite honestly. This was actually going to be a spot for me to talk about like intro to threat hunting, but people are listening to me all damn day long. So, and honestly,
let's give you a little break.
And I may or may not have deleted my slides. Well, no. But this is Kismet. This is.
I mean, do you want me to change talks? I have a quick talk on threat hunting.
No. But no. So I had actually reached out. We had a couple people that couldn't do stuff right away. So I'd reached out to the great Phil Hagen. I said, Phil. Recognizing that Phil is never busy and always has time and can just do things at the drop of a hat, I figured he'd be an easy one to ask.
Yep.
You know, and then he was like, well, as it happens, strangely, I am busy. However, I'm going to ask some of the people at Sands. And when he came back and said, the Jeff McJunkin can and is willing to come on, I was like, well, hot damn, yes. Jeff, I mean, again, I'm saying it over and over and over again about my favorite people, but it really is the people that have gotten to do this and help come give some content for the Pros vs. Joe CTF at home edition. Have been some of the people that I'm the biggest fans of, and you, sir. I have very fond memories of the first time I actually met you in person. It was at Sands, Virginia Beach, my first NetWars ever that I've actually played in. And like I knew your name, but I didn't put the face to the name. And man, talk about a good master of ceremonies. I am dog food next to how Jeff can run an event.
I think like anything, it's a skill, and having the unfair advantage of being able to run it, 10 or 12 or 15 times a year helped. And now it's just like just keeping pace.
Right, like.
It's fun.
Yeah, and then of course the more you do something and the more you get invested, you're like, hey, I can change this, or hey, I can do this, or hey, I'm gonna try to do this new thing, and you just add more work for yourself until you drink. But no, so you were I remember being on my first NetWars, and you were running it in Virginia Beach. I had so much fun, and since then, I mean, you've participated in a bunch of our like my own events at DEF CON, like between Hacker Jeopardy with Lintile and
events.
Yeah, little or just a little soirees.
Just a little official evening event at DEF CON.
Yeah,
no big deal.
Just it's a little.
I think DEF CON 27.
Yeah. Oh, look at see. I never have the presence of mind, or out of my mind to go grab that stuff.
This looks like the official banner. Isn't there only one of those? Huh. How weird.
Go figure. I know. Speaking of official things that are in weird places, I know of a friend's office in Seattle that has one of the doormats to Alexis Park
nice.
in their office.
I happen to know there's at least one Intel lab, allegedly, that has another DEF CON banner.
I don't even grab my own stuff. Like, I see banners for Who Slide, and I'm like, I don't even think to grab it. I have no memorabilia of my own events. It's just, but whatever. I'm not here for this. I'm not here to talk about my own events. I'm here to talk about you and you coming on and being awesome. This is a talk that I've heard a lot about. I've seen it personally, and it actually ties in very, very nicely with CTFs. It ties in very nicely with the Pros versus Joes thing that that CTF Factory is doing, and NetWars and things. I'm gonna actually we keep talking because we're friends, but what do you do, Jeff? What are you doing right now, like professionally?
Well, here, I think I have a slide for that.
Oh, you're already there. Okay, well, you know what? I am gonna give it to Jeff. Everybody,
No. I mean, we can still chat. No worries. I like keep this dynamic. This is fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to work for Counterhack Challenges, the authors of NetWars. I teach for SANS as well, as we've discussed. Since last year, I started my own company as well, just hang my own shingle, pen testing and red team type stuff, as well as general security consulting. A little bit of incident response, which has been fun. I don't know, certifications. Yeah, I have letters, but yeah. I came from a sysadmin, network admin background. And since you mentioned home labs, and I mean, this topic is obviously about to come up more shortly, that I give 2 recommendations. People say, how can I continue to advance my career? First and foremost, build a home lab, right? Because life is full of interesting questions. And if you don't have a safe place to test out and find the answers yourself, because that process of learning is very important too, not just finding the answer, but the process of finding the answer. That's really important. So number 1, build a home lab. Number 2, learn a programming language. I don't really care which one to start off with, but Python. Right? There are plenty of other languages out there, and sometimes there's reasons for others. That's fine. If you use C# at work or whatever, that's fine. Right? We can debate whether, like, I don't know, React or Meteor are real programming languages, so much as learn to solve problems via programming.
How dare you disrespect Perl like that?
How dare I disrespect Perl? Look, if anybody could read Perl, I would disrespect it less.
That's
but
fair.
it's a write-only language, right? You can't even read your own Perl, let alone somebody else's.
Fair.
All right.
But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna let you jump into this. This is
Sure.
your talk. Normally this is where I'd be like, everybody in your homes, give a round of applause for Mr. Jeff McJunkin. Take it away, Jeff.
Thanks, Danny. All right, so let's go ahead and start off more properly. All right, obligatory table of contents, right? Why build a lab? I'm hopefully going to convince you, if you're not already convinced by the fact that you're here, or at least you were stuck on this stream, so you're stuck listening to me. Believe me, I won't be too upset, but we'll talk through the hardware, Hypervisor, which I recommend, and there's flexibility here. This is not the one true way forward. This is one recommendation, my very biased approach to it. Talk about software, OS, and, well, within the operating system, application layer. Talk about my favorite section, stuff on the internet, right? Public IP address, having a Linux machine under your own control, and not a whole lot of firewall in the way, and some example labs to get you started. So first of all, why build a lab? Well, I think I said that second bullet point already, to answer interesting questions, right? Life is full of interesting questions. And for your own ongoing skills development, you need a safe place to test all of these questions, develop these skills as you go, right? In the, in the karate world, right? You go through kata, right? Walking through the same exercise over and over, and walking through, even if you understand an attack, walking through the actual steps until it's ingrained in your head is a very useful time. But again, for a home lab, I don't want to make things difficult, because human behavior being what it is, if you make something more difficult to work with, you're going to do it less. And your home lab time is usually, for most people, competing with Netflix time, right? Or some arbitrary thing here. I think Dancing with the Stars or whatever. So home lab, you need to make it easy to work with, and we'll emphasize that as we go. But I wanted to have the first time up here. And some interesting questions, right? Maybe you want to test out Google Rapid Response, or, hey, you've heard about this local admin password solution thing, but how does it actually work, right? These are all things to test in a lab environment, or more on the forensics side. What does time stopping actually look like? Could you recognize it? Another truism, you can't know what unusual is until you know what normal is. So see what normal looks like from an artifact perspective, see what examples of time stopping look like if that's something you want to develop. All right, so next up, hardware. Some people, when they think of home lab, think of some of the images on screen. And those are awesome home labs, don't get me wrong, but if only via the wiring on the image on the left there. I'm not sure if the highlight shows up on the feed, Danny. Just gonna put you on the spot. Okay, good. by seeing that wiring, to me, that means that whoever built this lab worked really hard on getting it to a nice, clean, perfect state. And then honestly, at that point, you don't want to mess with it. I prefer the dirtier labs, and not in like the malware sense of, no, it's a scratch lab. It gets changed around all the time, because if you're comfortable with changing it, you're comfortable with testing things, as opposed to a big perfect lab that you built once and never touch again. You want the incentives to be, it's really easy to change. So you don't need a whole rack. And I'm actually against, for most people, dedicated hardware. Because if it's dedicated hardware elsewhere, like those loud servers, then you're less likely to want to power it on, wait for the machine to boot, connect remotely, right-click view console. These are all pieces of friction, right? Reduce the friction, or as they say, more military world, high speed, low drag. I don't know why they say that there, but it amuses me. All right. So what are you buying? If you have a budget of $0, then we'll still have a way forward, right? Use the existing machine. You're probably viewing this cast from some laptop or desktop, and you can work with that. If you're on your phone, you're gonna have a tough time doing a home lab on your phone, but there's probably some box you can work with, and most labs can fit in a pretty small amount of space, right? But memory and hard disk, hard drive IO, IOPS will be your major limitations. So sometimes, yes, nested virtualization, it adds some complexity, but allows you to model some very complicated environments, right? Or if you just want to keep VMs going, that's fine, right? I will confess that NetWars Capture the Flag is going on, Mini NetWars is going on right now, and I am absolutely casting on another Zoom session from another virtual machine so that I could be joining this one. That's why it took me a little bit to join this session, was to hand off the Zoom to another VM. All right, so what do I mean by kick-ass? Look, off-lease server hardware is ludicrously cheap, absolutely, but it doesn't pass the SOF, the significant other acceptance factor. So a desktop case, a laptop, this is pretty ideal. We want to keep the power usage lower. And some of those big old dual Xeon boxes, like the machine that I went with, actually, it's unplugged. You're going to hear a loud crash, and I'm sorry. All right. This is the desktop I used to use. And it's great, but it takes some effort to move around. It's dual Xeon, but on the bright side, 128 gigs of RAM, and I think dual 8-core Xeon, that can do a lot, but you probably don't need that much. So instead, here's some specifics, right? If you want to build your own, building your own computer is a great experience, and AMD Zen 2 is kind of destroying everything else in terms of the price point, but you still can't beat used hardware for a lower barrier of entry. So some of those HP Z, the window is actually slightly in the way, Z440 nowadays. Share my video again. Clicking is hard. All right, Z440, a good place to start, because out of the box, less than $500 gets you 8 cores and 64 gigs of RAM. And this can be your primary workstation as well, because you can certainly render video, play games, whatever, run a bunch of virtual machines on this as well. And I prefer, when I have specifics in the slides, and I'm not sure if Danny's already shared, but I can definitely share the slide link. There's a bit.ly URL that I'll share at the very end with these exact links, as well as the PC part picker build list. That is the exact list to work with. And the price is going down because I was trying to be very smart about, what do they have? Dynamic filters. Pick whatever memory is fastest and best for the money involved. Look, solid state is totally the way to go. Never have more than one, especially Windows, virtual machine running per physical spinning hard drive. Going past that will make you sad. SSDs, whether they're talking about SATA-based or NVMe, can support a heck of a lot more IOPS than slow spinning hard drive. So stick with SSD for running your actual VMs. If you need a hard drive to be able to move VMs back and forth, which I do, I have a couple of hard drives just right around here, actually. That's fine. Just don't run the VMs from there. Instead, copy them out, the ones you don't need to use. All right, next up, let's talk about your hypervisor, the way you're running virtual machines. So type 1 hypervisors are those ES6Is, some actually argue for Hyper-V, the KVMs of the world, the thing where you dedicate the entire machine to running that hypervisor. I'm pointing just off camera to that desktop I just pointed to. But the issue there is, right, I'm sure many of you have dealt with this before. Right-click, open console. I'm speaking specifically about ESXi and vCenter and vSphere client and such. If you want to like resize the VM, you can't just resize the window. You got to go inside the VM. If you want to copy paste text or files to that VM, you need some VM protocol to do so, SMB or NFS or whatever. All of that stuff adds friction, and we want to lower the friction for your home lab. So I argue specifically for VMware Workstation, or now technically VMware Workstation Professional, because they have new marketing people and decided that VMware Player is dead. Long live VMware Workstation Player, because they're bad at naming things. All right. So I usually like VMware Workstation. I'm not against VirtualBox, by the way. If your budget is 0, then it does fit your budget. And Oracle is now actually pushing updates, so VirtualBox is pretty reasonable. But there's a lot of pre-built appliances for VMware in particular. So I argue usually it's worth the $100 or so once. You can wait for a sale if you like. All right. Now some argue, wait, what about these type 2 hypervisors within the OS, like VirtualBox and Workstation and Fusion? Aren't they less efficient? Yes. However, that's why we have overkill. And look, you're not serving production workloads. You don't care about that last 5 or 10% of efficiency. And yes, these are rounded numbers, absolutely. But it doesn't really matter about efficiency. What matters is, can you answer the question or not that is driving your home lab? All right. Next up, let's talk about software. So you don't need to spend money licensing the Microsoft products, especially for your home lab. In fact, I know this is recorded, but I'll still go so far as to say vendors don't care about piracy in your home lab, right? Cisco emulation is technically, unless you're doing the Nexus 1000V and paying a lot of money, technically, what's the GNS3 and other emulators are not so much in the way of legit. But Cisco has known that they've existed for a hell of a long time and hasn't cared. Why? Because it gets more people using their product, and nobody's serving production switching and routing workloads using GNS3, or they shouldn't be. So it doesn't really affect their bottom line. Same thing on the Microsoft side. I'm not saying to go out and pirate, but look, go to modern.ie. There's the link that's, well, now on the bottom right of your screen. It's pretty easy to find. You can choose your VM platform, VirtualBox, or VMware, and you get a Windows 10 virtual machine automatically, right? One quick download, there you go. Now, the beauty of this is, well, first of all, it's automatically pre-licensed for 90 days. Now, I wish I could tell you, no, just set a snapshot and you can revert to it later so you can get a fresh 90 days without having to re-download. But that would be wrong of me. That would be me telling you to bypass licensing. That would be bad. However, let me draw your attention to the text in the lower right of the screen. These machines expire after 90 days. Microsoft, recommend sending a snapshot when you first install that you can roll back to later. Oh, well, Microsoft can tell you to bypass Microsoft licensing controls, and that's fine. If you want to do a Windows Server trial, Server 2016, Server 19, whatever you want, there's 180 days between reverts. And honestly, the half-life of my VMs, often the half-life of my host operating systems, is less than 180 days anyway, so it doesn't seem to be too much an issue. Now, if you have MSDN access through your work, that's really nice. There used to be, if you have a .edu email address, something called MSDN Academic Alliance. That was kind of a subset of MSDN, but for free for every student. But then new marketing people came in at Microsoft, and they renamed it to Microsoft DreamSpark. But then new marketing folk came in, and they renamed it to Microsoft Imagine. And then new marketing people came in. I guess the old ones were, I don't know, killed or something. And now they call it Microsoft Azure Dev Tools for Teaching. But if you have a .edu email address available somewhere, that might be a good place for you to go. You can get actual licenses that don't expire at any point. Or frankly, if you work with a nonprofit, I absolutely worked with my local nonprofit that I volunteer for and got the full MSDN that I paid for. That because of the nonprofit discount was, I think, 3 years of full MSDN and $150 of Azure credit every month for around $300. Now, granted, $300 is a lot to spend on your own home lab, right? I try to keep this minimal, but it's nice just having essentially all Microsoft software for a 3-year period of time. So there's options to work with, whether your budget is $0 or getting up there into the $300 plus range. All right, so that's the Microsoft OS side. Now on the Linux side. So you could walk through slowly, painfully, installing Ubuntu 20.04, or if you're a Red Hat heathen, I guess Red Hat 8, you can do that instead, and like WordPress or whatever, and have the latest version of the OS with the latest version of the software and no plugins if you want to test WordPress. However, that's not what you want for a home lab. You want an older operating system with an older version of the software with a bunch of plugins. It turns out Turnkey Linux is not meant for, vulnerable builds of operating systems for your home labs, but it works really well for that. So I've included in the bottom here a link to a bunch of the older Turnkey Linux builds, because they do tend to pull them off the website as they do the new versions out. Another thing you can do is use Metasploitable. There's a version 2, which is Linux, and a version 3, which you have to build yourself, which uses Windows Server. Those are quite nice. There's even one more shout out for SecGen here. If you want to kind of do hack the box style or VulnHub style, it will generate vulnerable VMs, but pick a unique user level access and then root privilege escalation vulnerability every time via Puppet and VirtualBox, which is kind of awesome. All right. So looking at Turnkey Linux, there's lots and lots of builds there, whether you want to try Drupal or Joomla or just a generic LAMP stack. There's a bunch there. So please do take a moment to look through all of the available options you have to work with. All right. So that was Windows OS, Linux OS. Next up is Windows software. We've all experienced the pain, right, of a fresh Windows machine, virtual or physical, and oh, I want to do a thing. Oh, let me install the thing. Oh, I want to unzip something. Oh, it's 7-zip. Let me go install 7-zip. Oh, it's a .rar extension. Let me go uninstall WinRAR and install 7-zip, because it is the one true file extractor. But doing that every single time, manually, painfully, well, is a pain. So there are a number of package managers for Windows. And actually, I should say there is WinGit now. Microsoft actually in the last 2 weeks just added their own beta preview of essentially apt-get for Windows, which is kind of awesome. So I'll have to update this slide, and I'll do that at the very end here. But there's also Chocolatey, right? Choco on the command line, and that is like apt as well for Windows. So you can do Choco install VS Code, and now you have Visual Studio Code, because finally we can get over the browser editor wars, and Emacs and Vim both lost along with Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to throw out opinions here. All right, next up. How about vulnerable software, right? I could leave MS-17.010 unpatched, but then I can't have latest versions of Windows, Windows Server, Windows Client. Instead, I'd strongly encourage you, if you want a stand-in for any vulnerability on Windows, Icecast version 2.0.1, and I have the exact URL there, is really, really nice, because it has a corresponding payload or exploit in Metasploit. And look, if you launch Icecast, which is like streaming media, like Pandora for your friends, then you're vulnerable while it's running. If you launch it as admin, then it's an admin level vulnerability. If you didn't launch it as admin, then it's a user level vulnerability. If you launch it as a user, but you're a member of a group that provides admin rights, like you didn't just right-click run as administrator, the user account control prompt, then now you can test your UAC bypasses. It's really, really nice as a stand-in for pretty much any Windows vulnerability. So I'm quite fond of that vulnerability in particular. All right, so here's Night. And it's like a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shopping trip, right? You can click, I want to install Chrome. I happen to like WinDir stat, seeing disk utilization. There's our 7-zip if you want VLC. Remember in the good old days when we had to download like Media Player Classic and a whole bunch of codecs, right? Those days are over. We just install VLC instead, right? Notepad++, if only for the context menu. Right-click, open with Notepad++ is worth it by itself, right? If you want Putty, if you want Foxit Reader, whatever, Night's a good place to start off with. So I like that because when you download it, it's a very small binary, less than half a megabyte, and all all it does is download from the author sites each of the pieces of software that you specified, and I specified a big list there, and silently installs the latest versions of all of those in the background. And that same binary actually updates itself, the night one. So that same binary will update all of that software as well. So it's a nice one to keep in handy for your VMs. You want to get a bunch of baseline stuff installed quickly. I'm a big fan of that. All right, next up, stuff on the internets. Sometimes you might need your own top-level domain for testing purposes. Maybe doing DNS-based command and control. So you need a DNS domain of your own, unless you want to stay on your private network. But it's rather convenient to be able to test this stuff online. Did you know that some top-level domains are free, right? .tk, .ml, .gq, these are all free top-level domains, right? I'm trying to reduce the cost here, reduce the friction, because busting out your wallet or your purse tends to cause a little bit of people saying, I won't do that. Let's go back to Dancing with the Stars, or let's have a glass of wine and chill in Netflix or whatever, right? So I bought for my own lab purposes jrmlabs.tk for $0.00. And I argue that Freenom is really bad at the concept of upselling, because they tried to upsell me on jrmlabs.ml and .ga for free as well. I'm like, well, I didn't want that before, but if it's free, why yes, I will take additional free things. I think they're hoping they're going to make it up in volume, but that's not how selling things works if you sell it for $0.00. All right, since I mentioned DNS and having an authoritative DNS domain of your own choosing, if you want to test DNS-based command and control, right, then Ron Bowes has DNS Cat 2. There are other ways to do DNS-based command and control. This is a good place to start. Whether you're on the offensive realm and you want one extra method of command injection that's really, really flexible, or maybe you're on the defender side and you want to see what DNS-based command and control looks like from a network traffic perspective, then it's pretty easy to set up. I'm a big fan of DigitalOcean.com in particular, turning at $5 a month. One coffee a month, I can deal with that, right? Because what I want from an online virtual private server is a public IP address, a Linux distribution of my choosing, no real network limitations, no network-based firewall, not under my control, and not a whole lot of hassle. I suppose low cost, right? DigitalOcean scratches that itch for me. So you can point your name server records from Freenom, they have an online management system, and point it at the public IP address that DigitalOcean gives you, and poof, you're now an authoritative DNS server on the internet. That wasn't all that difficult, and that's all you need for DNS Cat 2, DNS-based command and control. Some people might think, well, should I build my own DNS server? And I have a couple of reaction slides for that, because no, never, ever, ever. We said we wanted to reduce the friction of using DNS in your own home lab environment. So nope the hell out of that, and instead use somebody else's DNS server, right? Just no. Anybody administered Bind 9? Danny, have you administered Bind before? Have you ever had a good time administering Bind? No. In the history of administering the Bind DNS server, nobody has had a good time. Reading somebody else's configs as an attacker is pretty reasonable, but editing them and I forgot to update the timestamp, so all of the downstream DNS server, I just put myself to sleep with that sentence. So don't do that in your own home lab environment, because what you're inevitably going to do is you're going to break your DNS config and then restart the service, and then Bind will fail to start back up and you'll be sad. That's what's going to happen. So instead, if you want something on the public internet, you can use free DNS manager from Freenom, the one that you got for free. Or if you want something enterprise grade, something like Amazon Route 53, because it's 50 cents per domain per month. Though they do charge you for all those DNS queries. They also make it up in volume because it's 40 cents per million DNS queries. Okay, I've yet to pay 51 cents for a domain, so not a huge deal. And just so you know, for your own lab purposes, you can absolutely return RFC 1918 private IP ranges from a public DNS server. Yes, you are absolutely leaking your own internal addressing, but that's okay. It's a lab environment. Who cares? I don't care if you know that dc.jrmlabs.tk happens to be 10.10.10.10. right? I don't care. It's a lab environment. All right, some very specific recommendations for VMware. So don't do LAN segments. LAN segments mean that your host has no visibility into that new network, right? That's a hassle. Unless you want to do malware analysis, unless you really need some strong isolation. Look, if you're dealing with like WannaCry in a VM and want to figure out how it works, don't accidentally let it out on the internet again, right? But look, it's already out there. But still, try to avoid that where possible. Now, when you do a virtual network editor, like VMnet 8 is the built-in NAT interface, you can do new VMnet interfaces and give them IP ranges to deal with. That way your host has visibility into all of those networks, but you can limit each VM to one view or another. We'll talk through some examples there. But your host will steal .1 and .2 in every single subnet, and it's really hard to configure VMware otherwise. So I'm a proponent of taking the path of least resistance instead, and, well, using PF sets, right? This is my time for strong opinions. I'm not against Viata, or there's another port of pfSense nowadays, but look, for free, fully featured layer 3, layer 4 firewall, lots of plugins available, even if you want to use intrusion detection systems or OpenVPN, pfSense is a damn good place to start. If you don't have any other strong opinion as to what you use, start with pfSense. All right, I'm going to outline a somewhat complicated network, but let me remind you, I said it before at the beginning here, and I'm going to say it again. Most questions don't require much to find the answer. 2, maybe 3 VMs. Right? Sometimes a lot of questions could be on just one VM. If you want to figure out how Mimikatz works, you need a Windows machine. That's it. You can use Mimikatz on the same box that you're infecting or running Mimikatz on. You can even take out the LSAS memory and bring it to the same VM. Right? It doesn't have to be a separate one. So simple labs fail in simple ways, and that means that, well, you're going to have a better chance of fixing it. A really complicated architected lab is going to have more failure modes, different ways it can fail. So keep it simple, but if you want to set up a slightly more complicated lab that can host a lot of different questions or find the answers to interesting questions, here's one possibility, right? 3 different networks, having the internet being the built-in NAT environment. But I'm saying make a new VMnet network, VMnet 1, make it a host-only network, and give it the 10-10-10 range. Then make a new VMnet interface, another host-only network, and have it be VMnet 2, 10.10.20.0/24. Now, I'm saying use pfSense, but remember .1 and .2 are taken. We commonly use .1, the first usable IP address, as the default gateway, but it doesn't ever have to be. It could be any usable IP in the subnet. So use .254, the last usable IP address for pfSense itself, right? Just keep it simple. That way your host can still see all of these environments directly, but you can absolutely have things isolated down to different VMs. So pfSense can see everything, the internet, the DMZ, and the internal system. So if you want to test pivoting, this works pretty well, right? Have a Kali VM, and it's coming from the internet. That just means you have it connected to the NAT network. If you want to have an attacker who plugs into your environment, change the interface to the internal network. They can have something like Turnkey Linux WordPress, and that's dual homed on the DMZ as well as on the internal network. So we're going to set up ourselves to attack from the DMZ and pivot to the internal network. Yes, this one's a little bit offensive focused, but I'll tie it through to the defensive and forensics realms as well. Then if you want maybe Metasploitable, right? An intentionally vulnerable VM, because maybe you don't want the complications of attacking Turnkey Linux or attacking WordPress. You just want to walk through the attack. Well, there are plenty of documented exploitability guides for Metasploitable. It gives you an easy point. So it's also on both environments, both networks. You have your Windows server. Maybe you want 2012 R2, maybe you want 2016, maybe you want 2019, whatever. You do you, as the kids say. Then have modern IE, Windows 10 client. And now you have a really nice setup for a lot of interesting questions. So walking through a little bit more specifically, I would strongly encourage you to make it easy to interact with your lab. If you have something like if you're using Windows on the host, then set up key-based login. right? This is a good thing to learn anyway. Now you can have a one-click shortcut on your desktop that means get a new SSH session via PuTTY to Kali. That way you can use your host because now copy paste and things are really easy to work with, and that's convenient, right? Maybe install FileZilla so you can transfer files easily back and forth. Whatever, make it convenient. The time spent making your own setup easier to work with is time very well spent because it'll be a future investment to yourself. All right, so you use Kali to exploit either Metasploitable 2 if you're feeling ambitious, or WordPress if you're feeling ambitious, or Metasploitable 2 if you want to walk through a guide. Then you can add a route to the internal network. You can install Icecast on the Windows client, right? This is a pretty common workflow. Attack something on the DMZ, pivot internally, find some low-hanging fruit, vulnerable machine, maybe dump password hashes there, right? Or cache domain logons, exploit the Windows server, dump domain hashes, and do your little happy dance, right? Woo! Because you have won, right? Profit. But yes, this exact same lab can be used for forensics purposes as well, right? Defense as well. If you're looking for memory artifacts, if you pause a VMware VM, it makes a .vmem file. That's a bit-for-bit copy of memory. That's actually better than what you get with most memory forensic tools, because those are technically a smear over time, right? So this is really, really good to work with. Volatility, recall, both support that format. If you want to test centralized logging, I love Windows Event Forwarding. Even if you use some other SIM at work, Windows Event Forwarding gets your logs for free in a central place that you can then ship them off to whatever SIM you want to deal with. Take a look at Swift on Security for their Sysmon, or I think Tay is I think they have their own adverb, if I recall. Anyway, a special shout out, JP Cert has a great blog post, a couple of blog posts actually, on tracking lateral movement through tracking event logs. Now, that sounds, a little bit esoteric. How about this? Here are all of the logs left behind on the client and the target of a whole bunch of attack tools with just Windows event logging and what forensic artifacts are left behind. That's awesome. I would love to see more shops that do something like, hey, I'm the SOC manager. I walked in and I ran a tool on one machine towards another machine using credentials. Hey, SOC, tell me what machine did I run it on? What tool did I run? What credentials did I use against which machine? And was it successful? Right? That's an awesome exercise for SOCs to run through on a periodic basis. And yes, there are slide notes for almost all of these slides you can read through as well. I just don't have them up because I only have so much screen to work with. All right. If you want individual VM challenges, if you want to grab your tasty beverage of choice, here I'm repping Powell's Bookstore in Portland, Oregon, then vulnhub.com is a great place to start off with. There are lots of downloadable free vulnerable VMs, very vulnerable apparently, and many of them have great walkthroughs available. I'm going to be blunt. Skip everything that doesn't have a great walkthrough, because there are plenty of vulnerable VMs out there, and if you get stuck, you can read the next paragraph and move on, do it yourself, and then get to the next step. If you ever get frustrated, I'd much rather you read a section of one walkthrough and learn and continue than to say, no, I'm Danny Akaki and I will never ever look at the hints because that's just me, right? Not that I remember that Virginia Beach, a certain host of yours, would never take hints ever. All right. Syracuse University also has a great series of downloadable VMs, each with specific challenges, like taking advantage of set UID binaries on Linux, or if you want to get started into exploit development, buffer overflow, or format string, or return to libc. These are great attacks to work through. And for your own learning purposes, a downloadable VM with that guide all the way through, quite nice to work with. And yes, I do hear that CounterHack makes holiday hack challenges available for free every year, and they keep them online, and they have great write-ups as well. So if you've never shell-shocked a system, or if you want to actually attack with Heartbleed and see what happens, that's in 2014 Holiday Hack Challenge. They have lots of challenges they made available as well, and they're all themed as well. So, right, Marley was dead to begin with, right? Oh, well, I understand this theme. Right? Old Marley was dead as a doornail. Well, that's Marley, by the way, is Scrooge's old server, but it came back online. Same IP, same MAC address, same SSH host key. Woo! Right? So it walks through the Christmas hacking carol. All right, and there's the good old TLDR. Slide notes have the details, but the base build is $425 or so for 64 gigs of RAM, 8 cores. That's a healthy kind of overkill because, as we all know, if overkill isn't working, you're not using enough of it, right? And having more resources can be quite nice. I like VMware Workstation, Windows OS you can get for free, at least trials and reset revert as necessary. Linux operating systems, Turnkey Linux, but exploitable too. Poof, 40 minutes. Actually, now, nailed it. All right, questions, and I don't know if Danny, you want to relay them. I'm not in the YouTube stream. I'm just in the Zoom.
Man, that was good. 40 minutes and now. I don't need no stinking hints. Kidding me? Let's see.
I will say these slides are online. This exact version I presented from today is bit.ly/kickasslab. bit.ly/kickasslab.
Hold on,
There's a recorded prior version, but frankly, this is recorded, so I'm going to be trying to steal from this stream this presentation because it's nice to have a slightly more up-to-date video version of it. Yeah, I might hassle you later for figuring out how to stream.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. I'll be able to download it from Twitch and I'll get it to you. The only downside to doing it like this, and I'll have to find a better way to do it, is that since you're over Zoom and you're sharing your screen, your actual face video is like blurry because I have to expand it. But I said in the chat, it's almost kind of cool because it looks like you're coming over like CCTV or something. Or like you're one of those video game characters that come in with a video that tell you what to do. Man,
it's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
Let's see. Do we have any questions? People are pimping your Twitter, which is awesome.
I'm on the Twitters. I have an email. This is my self-promotion. I also have a company. If you want pen testing, talk to me. Self-promotion over.
Let's see. No, not any questions, I don't think, but people just saying how awesome this was. And I said, if you think this is awesome, I asked him to do this 20 minutes before he was supposed to do it, and he's just on it. No, man, I don't see it. But yeah, Jeff is. My only question was for slides and answered already. Oh, yeah, Sog had asked in the chat if you'll share your slides, and yes, there's the answer.
/kickass
Yep. So, dude, Jeff, it's always lovely to see you, my brother. It's actually, if anything else, it makes me almost a little sad because I recognize that I'm not gonna be able to see you in person for at least a little bit longer.
DEF CON in person makes me.
Ugh, yeah, I know. We all had the joke. We all thought we were so damn funny.
I know, but now I gotta figure out how to get DEF CON 28 banner.
If anybody will figure out how to get one.
What vendor it came from? Maybe I'll contact them and say, "Hey, I'm totally from DEF CON. Ship me that banner."
Yeah. Hi. My name's Nikita, and you may have talked to me already on the phone, and just move forward, just breeze through it, and have, or say you're Grifter, DT, whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
Names or handles or nims.
Yeah. Just say yes. I am Jeff Moss's private assistant, and he asked that all graphics and vinyls be sent to me. Oh, well, we understood you're not having it. No, we are. So whatever you were going to make, bill it to Jeff Moss and send it.
Bill it to Jeff Moss, but send it to me. I like it.
Oh, there is one question from Retz. He says, where does he get off lease hardware? I think I missed that part.
There was a pretty early slide about hardware. There we go. See if I can see it. Can you still see this?
Yes.
Okay. In the next slide, there's that eBay link. That's for, I think, can you still see the new tab coming up?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then HP Z440, that same listing that's actually in the presentation is still live. It's $469 at the moment. But yeah, that's a 8-core, 64 gigs, 2 600 gig SAS drives that you're going to ignore anyway, and a video card that's pretty all right.
And
slide notes under bit.ly/kickasslab.
And Sog just said, but don't buy them all, you jerks. Unicorn Sex says, if you're using your lab machine as a workstation, aren't you worried about any of the malware getting at some of your regular data from other activities?
Not really. I don't do much malware analysis personally, but even if I did, look, if there is a piece of malware that you're examining that has a VM escape against the latest version of VMware, you have bigger problems, and you're probably not going to be examining that like nation state level malware in your home lab. So I am not terribly concerned about it. One, because I don't do a whole lot of malware examination, but that's why isolating from a VM perspective with the it's the one time I do recommend. What's it? LAN segments. That's the one time I recommend LAN segments, because that VM, only other VMs in that same LAN segment can see each other. Your host can't even see it. So again, unless there's some kind of VM escape, I'm not terribly worried about it from a malware escaping perspective. Right? So you can have pfSense that allows outbound access only, or plug in a USB drive, USB wireless adapter, and you could have that VM can see out to the internet via wireless, but can't see anything else. Right? We have pretty darn good isolation. If you want more isolation, then maybe have a dedicated box at that point. But I try really hard to scale up the one box to rule them all as much as possible, because it's now the box that you have alive already. If it just takes you launching Workstation and resuming a VM, you're more likely to deal with your lab. The more convenient it is, as opposed to, let me go fire up the R710 in the garage and then wait for 10 minutes and then start up the VMs. At that point, you're not going to want to, right? Friction, having barriers to entry is very important for human psychology. So hopefully that over answers your question.
I mean, I'd be a little extra worried, because since we're not going to be at DEF CON on site this year, where are they going to burn all their 0 days?
I know, right?
I bought all these burners. Like, I have enough burners for the next 30 years. What am I supposed to do with them now?
Yeah. At that point, if you have like spare old laptop or the crappy old desktop, you can use that for virtualization stuff too, just for those few things that you're extra worried about. Yeah. That does add some isolation.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
And there's some bonus content in here, like email based for phishing. Yandex is free. I love buying expired domains that are already categorized, so I can have known good HTTPS to a known good site that has already been marked as, I don't know, finance or healthcare. I especially like healthcare because even people with intercepting proxies that do SSL interception, they still often cut through and just allow the legit SSL connection for healthcare-related domains.
That's really I never thought about that. I never thought about getting expired domains that are already wow.
Surprise. In fact, it's still shared. So expired. Let me. I may have just broken NetWars for a bit. Okay, now we're okay again. Expireddomains.net. Login. You can't do much filtering unless you log in. Yes, I use LastPass.
Owned.
Archive deleted.com domains. Filter. I'm going to say under AdWords and SEO, only show me healthcare related domains. I don't know why this one isn't. Oops. All right, I'm back. All right, only available domains. The other one I like to have, and you can do other stuff like shorter domain names. Only show me up to 9 characters or so.
Interesting.
I don't control what's on screen, so we might see something a little bit naughty. I'm sorry. I'm going to sort by Alexa ranking and see if there's something common. It's been around for a while. It has some, it's like a more popular site because it's more likely to be already categorized. And yeah, there's an Alexa nearly top million site, ameparis.com, right? And that's available for, whatever .com domain works with. And they have links here to all of your registrars or registrars that are worthy, especially Namecheap, because that's the only good one. So you got all sorts of options to work with there. That's and awesome. Sometimes they're really fun. I think it was shelllakeclinic.com was one of the ones I purchased a while ago. It's healthcare related, and it says Shell right there, so I know where my shells are going. That was a fun one.
I bought toachlegittraffic.org one time, I think.
I own some-legit-site.com for similar reasons.
And like when you buy these domains, you don't think about it until all of a sudden all of them renew at once. And you're like, why do I have a bill for $6,000?
We call that the Larry Pesci problem.
Yeah, like they're all 12. They're all $12 a month, but that adds up after a while.
And there's all sorts of other specific recommendations in the bonus content section. So if you want to deal with like Sigma for applying generic sim rules, awesome stuff there. Creating Yara rules with YaraGen automatically, so you don't have to do it yourself. All sorts of stuff in there. So bonus content's there.
Dash said in the chat, good S Jeff, loved it, and totally going to make a beefier home lab with some of your tips.
Excellent, thank you.
Cool. Well, Jeff McJunkin, I could have you on the whole time, but this isn't even my event. I'm just the monkey running it. At Jeff McJunkin, Jeff at Rogue Valley. By the way, congratulations on your own new business, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, that's what? Has it been a year yet or no?
Yeah, just over a year.
Okay.
I think just a year, like almost exactly now, actually.
Because it felt familiar when because somebody reminded me because I forgot about it and like you and I talked about it.
No, I haven't been all that public of like, hey everybody, I left Counter Hack.
Yeah.
It's not like I hide it so much as I'm bad at marketing.
No, and plus those Counter Hack guys are nasty. You don't want them finding you.
Yeah, I know.
Can you imagine what Tom Hessman would do to you? All right, brother. Well, I love you, man. Thank you so much. This will count as our official goodbye because after I transition, all the audio goes, so can't chat with you on Zoom, but chat with you on Twitter, my friend. Thank you for stopping by. This was amazing.
Later. Cheers.
All right, brother.
Goodbye, everyone.
The Pros vs. Joes Stay-at-Home CTF is brought to you in part by Red Lion. Red Lion offers information security and compliance professional services that you can depend on to build systems, enable sales, and advance your corporate posture. With MRR and MSP pricing, Red Lion is a trusted source for compliance and security. For more information, visit redlion.io.